Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Worcestery Council Theater 3000. We are live here at Hunchback Studios in person.
I don't know what to do not staring right straight in the depth of your soul through my monitor right now. Being next to you, it's throwing me out of...
Just burn a hole in my temple if that feels right.
Yeah, I feel so
Next
close.
week
I
it's
feel
sore.
so close to you guys. I'm not used to this. It's freaking me out a little bit.
It is a little, but we're figuring it out. I'm very happy to be here with you guys. We're very happy to be in Travis's. This is where Travis lives. This is his home. Travis, you want to wave? Yeah, wave to the people. There he comes.
Here you go. He's trying to figure it out. Yep, there he is. Yep. Oh yeah, we're operating on a little delay on the screen.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, we probably can't look at ourselves on the screen at all because it is pretty significant. That's good to know. I never knew they were that delayed behind us before.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're here tonight to talk about. I mean, largely what happened last week at City Council. I think we're going to go
Do we
through
have a
that a little
full
bit.
title? Last week's shit show? Is that...
Yeah, last week's shit show. The death of Worcester democracy, I guess we'll call it.
Hell yeah,
Or
party.
as some people have called it, Worcester's January 6th. Kidding. Dan Margolis, if you're watching this, you fucking suck, brother. No, yeah. So a little bit later in the show, we're going to have on Ali Sislo from Worcester Havara, who is one of the principal organizers
Right.
of the demonstration, to sort of set the record straight, because I think after Tuesday we saw a concerted effort by the local political class, establishment, whatever you want to call it, to portray this as antagonizing and sort of needless disruption for the sake of it, and I would argue that it's really the other way around.
Right.
And thinking about it that way, we kind of need to rewind and go through the history of it a little bit. So I've prepared a timeline.
Oh, wow. Somebody did homework for this.
Okay, so first thing to know, and is very important to stress, and everybody should know this probably by now if you're watching this, last October, the City Council voted on a resolution submitted by first Mayor Joe Petty, then, after he got yelled at, by Councilor Mo Bergman, to condemn the barbaric and inhuman actions of Hamas. That passed 8-2. All right. And then we forgot about it for an entire year. The week of October 11th, a multi-faith coalition of organizers submitted to the city clerk a resolution to support a ceasefire in Gaza that contained no mention of barbaric or inhuman. There wasn't any sort of racially charged rhetoric in it. But nevertheless, on October 18th, the day that the agenda went up, the organizers were notified by City Clerk Nico Vangeli. I never have to say his name out loud.
Yeah.
Nico Vangeli.
Let's commit to that.
At 4:02 p.m., pretty much right before the agenda got posted, that hey, your petition is not going on the agenda, leaving no time for any sort of back and forth. Nico didn't even get back to one of the organizers till Monday. And on Monday, Nico told the organizers that they can ask the council to suspend the rules to allow them to speak, or suspend the rules to allow them to allow the petition onto the agenda. But his ruling that this was outside of the council's purview stands. The organizers themselves can ask for the council to overturn his ruling, basically, but his ruling stands that this is not fit to go on the agenda. So then the next day, October 22nd, the organizers hold a rally outside of the city council chambers from 5:30 to 6:30, and hundreds of people came out. The third floor of City Hall was stuffed. The speakers were great, a lot of really impassioned speakers. And some counter protesters that were nothing more really than annoying. And that was all well and good. That was all awesome. Everybody goes into the council chambers at 6:30, and right off the bat, Mayor Joe Petty says, "Hey, this isn't on the agenda tonight. You have to speak on something that's on the agenda." So the first speaker from the coalition, a young Palestinian American woman named Aula, gets up, tries to speak on it, says that she's speaking on another item that's on the agenda, and Joe Petty just doesn't allow it at all. She's trying to talk, he's cutting her off. She's trying to talk, he's cutting her off. Eventually, she gets escorted off the mic by a police officer who's standing right next to the microphone, which is very unusual for
Lying in wait.
lying in wait. Very unusual.
Legal term.
The police officer actually, when I reviewed the tape, the police officer asked the mayor, "Hey, do you want me to handle this?" So that was the only speaker from the coalition that got to speak at all, and she only got maybe a sentence or two into her address. Councilor Tu Nguyen calls for a suspension of the rules to allow discussion. That fails 5-6. You can probably guess what the 5-6 vote was. Attell to Christian, Louis Ojeda, to his credit, and Jenny Pasillo voted to allow them to speak. Everyone else didn't. Mayor Joe Petty was the swing vote to prevent them from speaking. It was very, very edifying for me to hear the entire coalition just chant shame at them repeatedly after that. Shame, shame, shame. Like it was out of Game of Thrones or something like that. It was sick. But
We should do that to Joe Petty
we should.
once a week, I think.
Right.
Just wherever he is walking
On
down the
his way
street.
to the car.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
morning.
Shame. Yeah.
Shame.
So that goes on for a little while. There's chanting. The city council votes to take a recess. They take a 15-minute recess where they try to come up with a game plan in the mayor's office, which is illegal, by the way. That's an open meeting law violation. They come back from the mayor's office, and their big game plan is to throw Nico under the bus, have the whole world watching as Nico says that it was his decision to keep it off the agenda when realistically it was, almost certainly the mayor's decision to keep it off the agenda. And then George Russell makes a motion to close the meeting, to adjourn. And they voted 7-4 to adjourn. And then all of our old guard crank counselors left with police escorts because they were so afraid of constituents being in the room demanding something.
Right.
They were put in a position where they actually had to do politics, and their only recourse being put in that position was to abruptly end the meeting. So that's where we were. That's how things ended there. And then the next day, Mayor Joe Petty gets on the radio and calls it an exercise in, quote, chaos and hate, which is fucking insane. Absolutely insane.
What a fucking moron.
And Kate Toomey, posts a bunch of nonsense. She was posting about how the clerk gave the organizers the option to suspend the rules, trying to insinuate that they didn't take that so that they could just sow further chaos. That's what she actually said in a comment. But there was a motion to suspend the rules,
Right.
and she voted against it.
She did.
So
And what says that at the next meeting that
the
they
vote would be any different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We saw how the vote played out.
Right.
So that's where we're at. You guys have any questions on our brief overview before we bring our guest on?
Yes. What's the point of this city?
What's the point of the city council?
No,
you
the
ask?
whole city. I think we.
What are we doing here?
Yeah. What? Yeah.
The thing that I'm most confused by is if you were to do political arithmetic, the fallout that they have now politically trying to make sense of a night that they Joe called something chaos. He created chaos. And but the options that he had, right, were, in his words, an open meeting law violation by bringing something onto the agenda or letting people suspend the rules to let people speak. I can't wrap my head around how either of those two options are politically worse than the chaos that he created by just shutting down by ending the meeting.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I need someone to make some sense of for me. Like, regardless of where you fall on a spectrum of the messages that were being put forth, like that detail, like the politics of it, is the thing that doesn't actually make sense. Like, every council meeting is some form of open meeting law violation. They're just consistent throughout the course of every stream that we do. The idea of suspending rules, I mean, but if you wanted to, even if you just wanted to make something go away, right? Like, they skipped over all of the opportunities to do that and jumped straight to, let's make the biggest mess as humanly possible in a way that we can't conceivably dig ourselves out of using logic and or reason.
Right, and I think the reason why they did that, in my opinion, is that like they're just so reflexively trained, or that's like they have such a tradition of telling community organizers to go fuck themselves.
Just go away.
That
if we just cover our eyes long enough, they'll be gone.
Right. So like that's kind of when I wrote about it, that's kind of like what I adopted as a core framework, is that like they just tried to repeat the playbook that they've used for any community groundswell that they've encountered since as long as I've been watching the council, of just trying to like nitpick and process them to death and let them get tired by trying to deal with unreasonable rules on public discussion and what can be on an agenda and what can't. And the difference here is that the organization just refused to leave. That's the thing that they really weren't counting on, is that, you know, somebody could conceivably care enough about an issue that they like aren't just going to be like, oh, well, the clerk said that we can't, that is against Rule 11, so we're just going to forget this ever happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
That's one thing that I want to mention, too, that if I missed you stating it, then I apologize, but I'm going to repeat it anyways, is the manager sticking around, even if it was just for optics, in the room with Councillor Nguyen, Ajiai, King, and Ojeda, I think spoke a lot, at least to an optical form of character. Like, I have no idea what is in his head, what he's actually thinking, but there was something to be said, I think, for the folks who stuck around for a bit there.
I mean, to his credit, he wasn't seemingly deathly afraid of the organizer.
Relaxed, yeah.
He was quite relaxed, and but you couldn't say that for Joe Petty. Joe Petty was like, out of fear or anger, his hands were like visibly shaking.
Yeah.
Like as he was trying to handle the meeting, and just I feel like he, like, still, if you talk to him right now, he'd be completely oblivious to the fact that like he created the mess.
Well, we joke about this all the time, but I mean, that is the mayor's primary goal in that room, is to make sure everybody gets along so that drinks at Piccolo's and or the Boynton won't be uncomfortable later in the evening. And I think that was like, that night he failed. There was just no way everyone was going to get together at Piccolo's and have a good time. And I mean, that stings him in the heart.
That's such an insane, like, primary objective for a politician, right? Like that the council, like this weird conception in Worcester of the council needing to be united, right? Like,
just not argue. Just don't bicker.
Right. Just don't argue. Just agree with what the city manager says, and then like we can get out of the meeting quickly and get mozzarella sticks.
Yeah.
So
with only one container of marinara sauce, we have to all be willing to dip in there together.
Yeah, and we'll have used our newfound consensus to equally divide up that mozzarella stick marinara sauce portion. Right. Well, I think it's a great time to bring on our guest, Ali Sislo from Worcester Havara, to set the record straight on this tomfoolery.
Come on in, Ali. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
We're very happy to have you.
When you get close to you.
Don't get
You're
distracted
really
by the
close.
weird delay on the screen.
Oh boy, yeah, not looking at that.
Don't look at the screen.
And
Yeah.
Ali, just bring that, talk right into that mic. Get it right up
Like
there.
this.
There you go.
Close, okay.
Yeah. So, Ali, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I just want to start out by asking you, like, what is like your main or your overall takeaway from what happened on Tuesday? How are you processing it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with many of the things that y'all were just saying, that in many ways, the council's response to this, it was like watching somebody savagely punch themselves in the face over and over again, and you're like, oh, why? You could make a different choice, which would be to let folks speak. So I think baffled is certainly part of it. But I would say, look, this at the end of the day, the coalition's goal was to put the question of ceasefire, and not just as a symbolic gesture, but as the material concerns that go into achieving ceasefire, that go into achieving the end of genocide, and not with the, I think the hubris of thinking that like a Worcester City Council decision is going to be the thing that stops genocide in Gaza, but to say that there are 13 towns and cities across the Commonwealth that have already passed resolutions much like ours. We based ours on theirs. The demands in them are very similar to that, to put pressure on the Massachusetts congressional delegation, to put pressure on the Biden administration, to say, you know, enforce your own damn laws, right? Like, it is illegal on multiple counts for the U.S. to continue to transfer money and munitions to countries that are committing human rights violations. And we've been in violation of those laws for quite some time, right? Like the issues in Palestine didn't start on October 7th, but anyway, I can go on.
Well, that's kind of, everything you just said is weird to me, especially after reading like the newspaper and hearing the mayor talk, because you didn't really say that the city council was the victim. No. I mean, their own victim, perhaps. I think there was a lot of like self-owning going on there. Yeah. Right.
So again, baffling, but no, I mean, it was a group of, I saw members of my Jewish community embracing Muslim grandmothers. I saw members of the Christian community holding up signs about peace with college students. From where I was sitting on the floor, on the constituent side of that nice wooden rail, in and among the plebs, it felt there was a lot of grief and certainly anger, but expressed in this like very loving and community-oriented way, and a desire to say that Palestinian voices and people allied with Palestinian voices have a right to speak, that we can't just keep enforcing this Palestine exemption for free speech. So if folks are frightened of that dynamic of A, their constituents, and B, they're like fuzzy on how to enforce their own procedures, what are you doing in city council? Like, what's your job? What's your role?
And then further, what is the point of the Worcester City Council?
Or of Worcester.
Or of Worcester, yeah. So I was there. I was there for the entire rally, and then I was there to watch speakers try to take what they said at the rally, which was really beautiful. I mean, Allah's remarks at the rally were, I watched them a couple times in reporting the story, just heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, and so powerful. And she tried to say the same thing on the record at the city council meeting and just was not allowed to even get through the first fucking line of it.
No.
And so, I noticed all of that sort of love in the room and camaraderie too. And then to hear Mayor Joe Petty the next day describe it as an exercise in, quote, chaos and hate. That's something that I really wanted to ask you about. How did you take Joe Petty's characterization of this demonstration as being sort of an exercise in chaos and hate?
I mean, that sounds like the last rhetorical refuge of someone who fucked up and knows it. I don't know what else to say about that. That is just objectively and categorically not what was happening. And if, I don't know, I think constituents have the right to express frustration. I think that, at the end of the day, part of the reason why that event took the shape that it did was because of the discriminatory application of Rule 11, right? Like you spoke about, the councilor-sponsored resolution on October 17th was not only heard on the agenda, but was passed. And I think the recourse that was offered to us by the clerk's office was, to say Rule 56 allows you to suspend meeting rules with a 2/3 vote, resubmit and try again. And our feeling was we submitted well in advance of the deadline. following all of the procedural guidelines. The October 17th resolution was not Rule 11 off of the agenda. We didn't want to be heard after the election. We wanted to be heard on the day that we submitted everything in order for, and that to say your recourse is, some future date it's a discriminatory application of their policies and procedures. So,
Right. And I think that the discriminatory application is really, really evident, and it should be underscored in the fact that you learned that it wouldn't be on the agenda, like at 4:02 p.m. And for people who don't know, the city council agenda goes live. It's like formally published on Friday afternoons about 4:35.
Yeah.
And your coalition heard from the clerk's office at 4:02 p.m., leaving you absolutely no time for even any sort of back and forth. So I wanted to ask you about to sort of refocus the conversation on 13 cities and towns in Massachusetts were able to get these resolutions on their local municipal agendas. And for some reason, although we're operating under the same state law, in Worcester, that just was outside the realm of possibility for City Hall. And I'm just curious what you make of that.
I mean, not only to get them on their agendas, but to pass them. I think that there are other places that encountered, these kinds of procedural demagogic pitfalls in the ways that we did. But, I mean, and it's not, Boston was able to pass one, right? So I think looking at, this is an incredibly popular issue, the idea of enforcing a permanent ceasefire, and materially enforcing that by stopping the transfer of weapons and money, by restoring humanitarian aid. That these are ways in which people feel very powerless right now on this issue, right? Like, this is not. It's harder to look at sort of micro implementation of grassroots solutions on this. There are decision makers who vote about how these funds are allocated. And so all of this sort of, I think, outrage and frustration at the idea that we have been enabling a genocide, I think people are really looking for an outlet for that, and that, to folks who say that city council isn't the place for it, if the federal government is not complying with its own laws, then whose responsibility is it to listen to the constituents and to say, I'm sorry, you gotta? Like, I think that that's where other layers of government have an ethical, legal, moral responsibility to say, our constituents are coming to us and saying that you're falling short. So we have to now hold a line that maybe we'd rather be talking about other things. And sure, great, fine, but it's a fucking genocide.
Right. That's a little bit more important than individually voting on every single pothole that gets filled in the city, I think. But I think that this has been really lost in the discussion as the sort of the powers that be try to move the discussion into a framework where this was a disruption. And I would ask, disruption of what? What does the city council actually do every week? But I think it's important to just hear in your words, there's a practical effect that city council resolutions on the Gaza ceasefire have. And sort of what, in your words or to your mind, is that practical effect?
Yeah, I think it's that optical. I mean, it's. I think that there's a plurality of things here, right? Like, it's the optical impact of, people may not be able to sustain calling McGovern, Markey, Warren every single day, right? But we can say we had this petition of 1,500 signatures. We can, and that they were Worcester residents. We can say that the city council decision would have been a distillation of that political will on behalf of those 1,500 people, to say to the folks who actually have the up-down power to sign on to the joint resolutions of disapproval, right, that Senator Sanders brought forward, and that, the last meeting I was in with a Warren staffer, they were like, well, she's considering it.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Does she need help? Like, what is there to consider? I'm really confused.
Right.
So those folks need to know that their constituents want them to take a stand against genocide. Again, I like the idea that we have to keep repeating this over and over, as though there's some really profound argument that needs to be made to get people behind that is baffling to me.
Right. I mean, like, what more moral argument could you make? But I mean, I think in Worcester, especially, it's important because with Jim McGovern, we have like one of the few congressmen who can actually be moved on this issue, like in the entire country.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't moved as much as I would like him to, but he like has been like more willing to be out front on like suspending arms sales
Yes.
to Israel than anybody else. So a resolution coming from his home base of a city in support of a Gaza ceasefire and of ending the genocide like that, there is a practical effect to that. And it kind of gets back to this.
Well, he was supportive of the resolution.
Yeah,
We told him about it.
He was
and he
personally
was like-
supportive.
Yeah.
See, that's crazy. That is so crazy. I do not understand how we can have a Jim McGovern at the federal level and a Robin Kennedy who was also vocally supportive of this at the state level, and then our city council is just full of little piggies. Like, how is that the way that it is, that they couldn't even like entertain the argument? Like, what do you think that they were so afraid of by just like entertaining the why wouldn't they just take a vote?
I mean, I think, to the point that you made in your piece, right? I think that this was a proxy vote, right? That the vote on suspending the rules and allowing us to speak was pretty much the breakdown that we would have had we been permitted, had they permitted us to be heard.
Yeah.
So I think the question for us was more about having in the public record, the voices of Palestinian folks, of people making the argument in support of Palestinian solidarity. And I think that's, I wish I understood why that's frightening for people. I think that there's a complicated number of reasons, but I'm also like hesitant in some ways to give voice to something that I think is spineless and evil. So, fill in the blank here with like the worst thing you can think of.
Right. So how could this have gone differently?
Well, I think that there was an escalation in part because we wanted to be heard. It was a discriminatory application of the rules. Had they just said, okay, come speak, we would have spoken. They could have voted us down like they really wanted to.
Right.
And then it would be done. And it actually, that would have been a real Pyrrhic victory in some ways, right? Because we would have gotten into the public record all of the things that, Palestinians deserve to be heard saying.
Right.
And we would have lost the resolution.
Right.
Worcester would not have joined those 13 towns and cities. So that would have been, I think, the quickest way to just, for them to move past this. So I'm not sure what constituency they're trying to appease. I'm not sure, what deep twilight of the soul they're not willing to confront. But that could have just been that. We would have had our rally, we would have had our public comment, and we would have had the vote.
Yeah. I mean, so just one second, I want to acknowledge we got a band practicing in the background, so if it becomes hard to hear, we're deeply sorry. We don't know the band's schedule, which is, we're trying to figure that out. We've FOIA'd for the band's records. They haven't gotten back to us yet, but through the Secretary of State, they have 10 days. So, but anyway, no. So I think that like what you just laid out, like for like a politically savvy person who wanted to do what the mayor obviously wanted to do, it seems like letting the vote happen would have been the better course of action.
Yes.
I mean, like that's
Yeah.
like if we want to put ourselves in the mindset, and I know I can see Brendan putting his Joe Petty goggles on
no,
right
I
now.
mean, the thing that kills me, and please tell me I'm wrong, because I don't know the organizers personally. I don't know the majority of people who showed up personally. But I'm pretty confident that nothing gets people out for anything more than anger and frustration. like, I have to believe that you would have had a smaller crowd at City Hall and a less vocal crowd at City Hall had they just put you on the agenda. And this is like the perfect backing track for this conversation. I'm so in love with this right
this
now.
is awesome.
But it's like,
I don't know if anybody can hear it.
no, it's fine.
We're
No,
only
it's
Wow.
This is for me. This
If
is, it's like, it's such upside down town in the way that, like, the goals that whatever goal the mayor was trying to accomplish quite literally blew up in his face in the simple sense that you made people angry, and they came out to show you exactly how it, and not just their pre-existing anger with frustrations with global affairs, but that you told your own constituents that they're not allowed to speak at a council meeting. And then you feigned surprise when they showed up to tell you to go fuck yourself. Like, that's
Again,
amazing to me.
When a councilor-sponsored resolution on the same topic last year, again, passed overwhelmingly.
Technically, the mayor's resolution. It's just the people around Joe said, "Hey, man, what the fuck you thinking?" And it got punted.
Yeah. So no, I mean, I wanna believe that as many people would have come out had this not been the case, but I think you're probably right that there was, an escalatory effect that the discriminatory application of the rules had on turnout. And the idea that the council was playing into, like I said before, the Palestine exemption for free speech, that this is just a topic that people are so unwilling to give any kind of platform to, which is really fucked up. It's a genocide. I know it sounds repetitive to keep saying it, but it's a genocide.
I'd like to pull out and spend a little bit of time. I'd like to hear you speak more about the Palestinian exemption for free speech in sort of American discourse. And maybe not even how it manifested here, but just how this is an example of that general dynamic in government and in media. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is an issue where people face, I think, a lot of severe repercussions. There are organizations like Canary Mission, which basically exists to be, a repository of people that they've, think have committed, thought crime against the Zionist entity. And it ranges from, academics to organizers to, just people who have been quoted in the wrong place at the wrong time. And some of them, so there's that kind of effort going on. There are lobbying groups like Camera that, enforce different kinds of restrictions on free speech and targeting people. People lose their jobs. They're doxxed. I mean, this is the escalation of both rhetorical, of symbolic, of actual violence against people who are speaking on behalf of Palestine, and especially if they're Palestinian. Especially as a Jewish person, I want to emphasize that the onus of that falls most heavily on Palestinian people, and like that what is happening to them here in terms of that silencing, as we saw at the city council meeting of watching the police escort Allah away from the microphone. But I think that happens on this sort of more micro-municipal level. I think it happens, online, in digital discourse. It happens in, these larger lobbying spaces. But it has an incredibly chilling effect. I think it's very frightening to people, the idea of losing their livelihood or of being doxxed.
Right. And that's why I think that, almost more powerful than any sort of council vote, any sort of headline from the Telegram or whatever, was that 1 minute moment of Ala trying to speak, the mayor continually speaking over her while some Zionist is hooting in the background. It's not on the agenda. Wait a minute. And Joe Petit goes, no, I hear you. While Ala is speaking, he says, I hear you, to the Zionist shouting over her in the background, prevents her from speaking to the point where he has a police officer escort her off the mic. Like, that moment right there was more powerful and said more about the political discourse in Worcester than anything else about that demonstration. And it wasn't chaos or hate. It wasn't disruption. She was just trying to speak.
And she was trying to speak on item 9M, which that night pertained to the city solicitor and the city solicitor's role in the application of rules. So, I mean, you know, if council can make the argument all at once that it wasn't on the agenda, but she was speaking on an item that pertained to the city solicitor, who is part of the decision-making complex around what makes it onto the agenda.
Exactly. And Joe Petty refused to even entertain that, which is a legitimate claim to being able to speak, as soon as he heard, I am a Palestinian American. As soon as he heard the word Palestine, he's like, that's not on the agenda. Palestine's not on the agenda. Shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. And so I think that's a really sort of ham-fisted and interesting example of the Palestinian exemption for free speech in this country.
Bill, I just want to say, like, in the chat, we have a couple comments about, like, you know, the reasoning why that things went the way they did, and Ruth mentioned that they didn't think that city councilors wanted to be on the record, you know, voting. I think either way, honestly, and they used a technical way to shut it down. Maine South Mom made a point about not being afraid of hearing Palestinian voices. They're afraid of backlash, and that they didn't want to hear 2 hours of public comment. My contention is that if it were any other group of people, they wouldn't have the gall to use a technical excuse, or to say, or to even make let anyone think we just don't want to hear it. Like, this is a very specific group of people right now that are it's okay to brush to the side, or for a political reason or a technical reason or anything like that. And I think that's where even if quote unquote they have an excuse, it still comes down to a censoring of Palestinian issues, because they're Palestinian issues.
Yeah, and if they want to, I mean, I understand that, you know, the meeting on the 15th was also a clusterfuck, right? And for Rule 11 reasons also. But if you're tightening up the language around that, then formally tighten up the language around that. In the meantime, to apply the rules differently to the meeting on the 22nd and to our resolution than you did on the 17th, and not just something hand-wavy, like, we're going to be better boys and girls next time, but, like, actually tighten up your language.
Right.
And in the meantime, apply your own rules consistently.
Right.
And, you know, I'm sorry that these things happened at back-to-back meetings. You know, that's a fluke of timing that I understand is optically unfortunate for people. But, you know.
But and it's very clear that it was an optical problem for Joe Petty. But why? Fucking why? Mm-hmm. Like, why is it when people are engaged for once, and I know the reason. I know it's because he wants as little engagement as possible. They're for them it's better if no one's paying attention. But why does he think that it's something like that he can get away with, one, and two, that makes him look okay, that he can go on the radio the next day and come up with and like have like something to say about it, is so embarrassing, because there's nothing wrong with what happened. There's nothing, the intentions for the last meeting, there's nothing wrong with that at all. What the effect was also, in my mind, and I think most people would say, wasn't like, there's nothing embarrassing for the city council about that. It's their votes were embarrassing, but what the effect was, I mean, Bill spoke to a woman in the crowd who, if you ran into her on the street, you would think she's the number one person that would be like, oh, that was violent, or that was, you know, would buy into the bullshit. And she was like, that was the most amazing and sweet and well.
This
like,
is the best protest I've been in years.
The best protest she's ever been to in her life.
Her name was Elizabeth Mullaney, and she was like, you couldn't like produce a clone of somebody you think would be more of like sort of like a revanchist reactionary townie. And she's just like, no, I'm here, and I just want to see how they vote, because I just think it's so beautiful. The rally was so great. And it was really, and it's like those are the kind of people that put Joe Petty in office. Like, those are the kind of people that vote every year. And to hear someone like her, like, speak so glowingly and supportive about the Palestinian cause, I think that Joe really has a disconnect on his hands. Also, optically allowing the birthers to speak, and then shutting down the Palestinians calling for a ceasefire, like. That's crazy bad optics, and I don't know if we've stressed that enough. They let the birthers speak for like as long as they wanted, 4 minutes. 4 minutes they let they let Hampton Beach Tammy talk about how we need to show papers, but
They also turned off the audio on the city council stream,
That's
which I think
right.
is incredibly important for audience members to know that like what you couldn't hear was us singing like civil rights classics like "We Shall Not Be Moved."
Our viewers
know.
are aware of what was happening because Bill was in the crowd.
Right,
but
got
we
it.
noticed, and I don't know that any of us actually mentioned it, every once in a while we will cover a school committee meeting.
Yeah.
And they have a different audio setup where you don't hear anything other than the person speaking. They're unidirectional mics. They only pick up that speech. They switched to that system right when people came into the chamber, and you could hear it click off. Like it was normally there's always that ambient sort of background, whatever you hear people whispering, murmuring, dead silence, other than the people speaking directly into the microphone, which was, I think, more jarring for us because we could hear it off of the feed that we were getting, but then having Bill in there in the background, we were kind of hearing like a broken stereo setup in a weird way. It's,
Yeah.
Your point
Yeah.
is incredibly important because that's not typically how council meetings go at all from a viewership perspective.
And on the recording on their website, like the audio's gone. So, you know, if you missed all of this and you wanted to go back and see that, like the official stream, you wouldn't be hearing that it was singing. You wouldn't be hearing that it was, you know, people comforting each other. You wouldn't be hearing that it was, you know, really the point is that it's effective in part because it's an intergenerational, multi-faith coalition of people who are coming from different, like, cultural traditions, coming from different backgrounds to say that what is unifying us here is calling for an end to the genocide and asking that the Worcester City Council find it in itself to see itself not only as you know, listening to and lifting up its Palestinian residents, but also as in dialogue with the 13 cities and towns across the Commonwealth who have the ability to put pressure on our congressional delegation. And you know, it seemed like they weren't up to it.
So I think it's worth stressing there that if we had one more Attell and one less Joe Petty, that's what it would have been.
Yeah.
There would have been like maybe 5 cranky old fucks in the background being like, I can't stand that this is going on. But like the everything would have gone forward. And there would have been a vote, and it would have been an affirmative vote.
Besides the fact that if there literally was no Joe Petty, then the item would have been on the agenda.
That's true. Yeah. It, like really, Joe Petty is like kind of singularly to blame, and it's like
In which he copped to on Hank's show
He
the next
did.
day. He said I shouldn't have let the last one on the agenda.
right.
Ostensibly not his call to make.
Well, yeah, but I mean
Well, we met with him in, I believe it was in July, like a subgroup of the coalition met with him to see if he would support the resolution, and he told us ultimately after a long delay period and not through him directly, he had a staffer call us, but you know, I think one of the things that he said was that he didn't want his council divided. And I think that to me really like is a chicken, egg, cart, horse issue, right? Like the council is a politically diverse animal, right? Like you have a divided council.
Right.
That's not something that any particular political issue is going to produce. It might reveal it in particular ways,
And
but
that's
it's
what
not
he
going
means.
to produce that. And it's like,
Right.
well, I mean, then get out of politics, man. I don't know what to tell you.
yeah.
But that's what we were talking about. In Joe's mind, a divided council is there's one mozzarella stick left, and we have to figure out how to evenly disperse this amongst all the council members still at the Boynton. How is this possible if
Yeah.
Mo and Attell are not speaking on speaking terms? That
From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Is that what we're saying Joe Petty's platform is?
That's awesome. So I want to talk because like this was like I think kind of a sea change, watershed moment in Worcester politics that we're going to continue to see ripples from, or at least I hope. I want to ask you if you have any sort of real sort of silver lining type thoughts that you're holding on to about how this all went down on Tuesday. None at all. All right.
No, I mean, I think I would echo what folks were saying about it, that the experience of, I think, of being in a group of people, again, it's really where the chaotic and hateful rhetoric just feels like it's just not attached to anything in consensus reality. It's nice here in consensus reality, depressing often, but like It's nice. I mean, it really, that moment of, I think of the amount of organization that went into it, of folks supporting each other, of singing together, of that shared purpose. I think that energizes people. I think that brings people into, I don't know, I think people feel tired. I think that they feel small, disempowered. I think that everything about a white supremacist capitalist political system is bent towards the end of making everyone feel alienated and disenfranchised, and that is one of the broader social benefits of actions, is that it allows people to come into a third space together and say like, oh, I'm not the only one who feels devastated looking at what's coming out of Gaza and what's happening in our city. I mean, I think in the rally beforehand, Patricia Kirkpatrick gave her speech was about connecting, the ways in which tax dollars of Worcesterites going towards, bombs that are killing children could be instead used for any of the number of issues. I took a look at the Worcester City Council budget. It's raising by 3%, right, for fiscal year 25. Like, they don't want the $2.8 million that we're giving. I mean, I get it's a drop in the bucket compared to the total budget, but like, we're just leaving that on the table. We're just saying that actually I think that's better spent as a bomb. I don't totally get. So I think like that connection of saying, it also has a way of saying we can take that political power, and not in a chaotic way, not in a hateful, like, I just don't even understand. It allows people to feel part of something towards making something better.
Right, and I think that's a very important silver lining point to stress, is that the effects to sort of combat the deflating and the depressing atomization that everybody in this fucking country feels by coming together around a common cause and having like a shared adversary, honestly, that's like we can actually do something in this arena. And Mayor Joe Petty just, I think, showed to be like somebody that thousands of people like have a renewed interest in seeing suffer some political consequences for how he's handled this. Has there been any thought or talk about bringing this to a point where it could one day level political consequences on Mayor Joe Petty?
I mean, I think if this brings a new group of people, and there were a number of folks in the coalition and in that room who were saying, we've never been a part of any kind of council-oriented organizing before, that this is new for us. And how much better for them if they had been sort of like welcomed into participation in the political process and told that their voices mattered and said that actually you too belong in Worcester, and we're not making extraordinarily transparent and racist and Islamophobic gestures to disenfranchise you. But I think that if people don't feel discouraged by that and instead say, this is a place where, in a year or 2 years, whatever, I can challenge folks who say that I don't have a place here, and that I can represent the disenfranchised voices in Worcester. Certainly the 1,500 people whose signatures on the petition meant fuck all to, the majority of the council.
Which is funny because elections are decided by a few hundred votes. That's kind of interesting that they would say fuck you to 1,500 people when you can get 6,000 votes and be a city councilor. That's kind of crazy that they would do that.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Things to ponder.
Yeah. I think definitely things to ponder, and I think that none of us will ever be able to exact any sort of punishment on Joe Biden, but certainly can exact punishment on Joe Petty.
Yeah, the Joe Biden of Worcester.
The Joe Biden of Worcester. That's right. Just as sleepy. You co-signed that, right?
Yeah.
You co-signed that comment?
I
Do you agree?
temporarily lost my hearing. The band is so loud.
Yeah. Yeah, Grand
The
Theft
follow-
Autumn's too loud, I guess.
Yeah.
There's so much thrashing.
No, but so I want to talk to you more because I went out to your organizations, have a little celebration at the Quaker, what is it called? Quaker
Quaker Friends Meeting House.
Meeting House. And I was
Made it that close to Technic Square.
yeah.
That
They
makes
didn't
me
turn
anxious.
me around. Yeah. Yeah. No, I didn't get pulled over this time either. It's crazy.
Something we'll have to work on.
But no, I just want to give you some space to talk about your organization and your organization's approach to Jewish identity and Zionism, because I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, so my stake in the Multi-Faith Coalition, I mentioned earlier that I'm Jewish. I'm also a co-founder of the Worcester Havara, which is a group, a lay-led group of Jews and friends of Jews who participate in create community and ritual decoupled from Zionism. So we spend a really long time thinking through the nuances of relationship to diasporism, so thinking about Jewish life, community, identity, whatever else, outside of Israel, of non-Zionism, which I think is very related for obvious reasons, and then anti-Zionism. And I think the members of our group, I think, are all over that particular spectrum in terms of which term makes the most meaning for them. And I think the idea is to have a community, though, where the normative assumption is that we are not orienting to Israel as either, this object of longing, as a political aspiration, and that we move politically in ways that are in solidarity with Palestine liberation, with Palestine organizing. But that it also means that we are, there's a word in Yiddish, Doigkeit, which means here-ness. And it was a political idea that contemporaries of the early Zionists, the Bund, which was a Jewish socialist labor organization, really, and they had this kind of, cosmopolitan solidarity kind of mindset. And the idea of Doigkeit, meaning here-ness, is that you build where you are, and that you build relationship where you are, and that, and I think we can see echoes of that in the way people think about land acknowledgement, about, how to actually materially enact decolonial ideas of solidarity. But that, the idea of here-ness is really important to the way that we're practicing. So what you were seeing was a community sukkah event for the harvest holiday of Sukkot, which happens after the high holidays. And it was a way of saying that, like, we, have a presence in Worcester, and that has material meaning. As Jews, as people, as friends of Jews, as folks who are existing in a larger political and material ecosystem, and that is a huge part of how we think of our community, and the fact that it's lay-led, the fact that we, rotate ritual leadership, that we make decisions collectively, and it was in large part we didn't see a lot of these values reflected in the institutional options available to us, and so it was like, well, so you make your own.
That's great. That's a classically Worcester spirit. Fuck you, I'll do it myself. I love that. And I thought it was, I don't know, not to talk about this too long, it might be a little bit too specific or whatever, but the sukkah, I thought it was really nice, Eliza, the way she talked about it, as being sort of like peace comes through openness, not from walling yourself off, not from borders. Like the entire thing was really decoupled from any sort of political context or like I don't know what you even call it, ancestral right of return sort of rhetoric. And then as I'm writing up the story on that, I Google Sukkah and Sukkot, and the first story is, massive Israeli settler Sukkot tent city erected on the border of Gaza as part of a imminent resettling campaign. So it was crazy. It was just crazy to see the two ways that the holiday could be represented, where one was pretext for an invasion and the other one was just really nice and was a really heartfelt, nice thing. And so I think that I just wanted to make that comment because it's a very important distinction.
It's a thing that I think I'm continually working through in sort of like cultural or faith organizing, and I think especially like Judaism doesn't require a belief in God. So I think this idea of, text is fundamentally neutral, right? Like you can find, I mean, there's a line in the Talmud about the Torah that like, you can turn it over and over, there's everything in it. And I think you can find justification for truly any ideology or mindset, and people of any faith looking at any religious text, right? Like you can instrumentalize and cherry pick to your own political ends. So the question is less for me about, this is a faith-based motivation, and rather to say like, this is a cultural heritage, and what are the ways in which I feel that it has been warped and mangled and misused, and what are the ways to be in right relationship with the folks that came before us and with the folks that are around us, Jewish or not, and how do we, as we turn it over, because everything is in it, not in a cherry picking way, like it requires us to really, I think, sit in intense individual and communal contemplation of like what is ugly. And that's all of our responsibilities. I think especially folks who, identify as white and move through the world as white people, like we have to sit in contemplation of that ugliness. But then we also get to say, what are the things that we are taking out of that to make something that exists to reach across, to invite within. And that Sukkot is a holiday about inviting in guests, and specifically like non-Jewish guests. It's always so funny because it is a harvest and land-based festival. It's, I think, easy to twist it towards the kinds of settler colonial ideology that that you were naming earlier. But it really is about like invitation and connection.
Right. So I'm curious, just picking your brain. Same thing that there is, like a Palestinian exemption to free speech. There's sort of like I don't know how to say this, an Israeli overcompensation, and you're on the forefront of a message coming from a Jewish tradition that like is kind of at odds with what the mainstream thing that you normally hear, and I'm wondering what your experience has been being on the vanguard of that.
Yeah, I mean, so there are a couple of great books that came out fairly recently that kind of explore this idea of the question of like intra-community Jewish dissent around Zionism. One is Jeffrey Levin's book called, I think it's called Our Palestine Question, and then Marjorie Feld's book, The Threshold of Dissent. But I think both of those books, I think, really try to explore and problematize and interrogate a narrative that that there is some kind of monolithic or homogenous Jewish perspective on this topic, and that there always has been, that there's this sort of like atemporal, a priori, it's existed time out of time, like all of these things exist in a material context. And so trying to situate that and to say, what are the histories that have been sublimated or disappeared for the purposes of these other kinds of narratives that serve ethno-nationalism, that serve supremacist narratives, that serve Western imperial interests in the area. So I mean, I find institutional Jewish life personally, I'm only speaking for myself and not for other folks in the Havra, other people who feel differently and have different kinds of relationship to this. I find it fairly alienating, for a variety of reasons, but this is certainly among them. And I think that's why the Havra is a space that, like, again, we're not trying to, I think, enforce or place enshrine something at the heart. Like at the end of the day, a nation state doesn't belong at the heart of like our cultural practice, and neither does the antithesis either. It's saying we're building something that exists next to that, and then we are also in solidarity and in movement, to say that like this is like not in our name.
Right.
So yeah, but like if people are questioning, if people are trying to figure it out, if people are like, this has been something that's defined me, and now I'm sitting in kind of a deep cognitive dissonance about that, like, you're welcome to like that position is also welcome, because the point is to say there's a stifling of dissent, there's a stifling of discourse, how do we exist in a space where like we can hold that.
Right. So for somebody who if that person is listening, how can they get involved and where can they find you?
Yeah, so we are on Instagram at woohavarah, so that's WOOHAVURAH. And we also have a website, which is worcesterhavarah.org.
Great. I covered everything I wanted to. I'm wondering if you guys have any questions for Allie?
No, that
Yeah.
was fantastic.
Yeah, that's really incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Allie, thank you so much for...
Oh, actually, one more question. Just circle back about that Joe Petty thing. Do you think that he should suffer immensely? Do you think Joe Petty should suffer immensely politically for his transgressions? Or?
So you're really hitting me in a deep quandary because I am an abolitionist, and I do believe no one is disposable, everyone is necessary, and also transformative justice paradigms are like it requires like the participation of people who have caused harm in order to be effective. So there is a part of me that is itself petty and small that says bring back the stocks, but like then there is just sort of like I'm like, how do I reconcile that with an abolitionist mindset? So I too, imperfect, in process, trying to figure things out. Vote him out of office. Vote him out of office. Vote him out of office.
You heard it here first, folks. We are bringing back the stocks, but in an abolitionist context.
Please don't let that be the only thing.
Somebody clip that.
No.
Just it was all parody. It was all parody.
For humor. For humor.
Allie, thank you so much. This
you
was
for
a
having
this
me.
was a
Really
great
appreciate it.
conversation, and I admire all the work that you put into all of this, and I hope you keep at it and keep doing the cool stuff in the city.
Thank you for covering it with integrity, because so few people.
That's right, and that's
Thank
why
you.
you need to subscribe to worcestersucks.email.
I was setting you up for that.
yeah. Thank you so much, Allie. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Allie. Thank you.
And to
there
the
it
Fall Out
is.
Boy cover band in the back, thank you so much for providing the soundtrack.
Yeah, I really hope they have a good time on their cover set this week, playing Fall Out Boy songs.
They're not bad.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's getting picked up on the mics that much, but it seems like they're just going through from under the cork tree, which is...
I think what we need to do if we're going to be in the space on a regular basis is invite them up here. And that just needs to be the house band.
House
Yeah.
band.
We just get one extra camera, pan over, and
Boys, can you play originals only, please?
yeah.
They're great. They're great down there. Well, good for them. I hope they have a good time at whatever show they're playing with a Misfits cover band this week. I think we're going to wrap it up there.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about before we go. Obviously, we're not doing an election show next week, as we told everybody, because we'll all be in our bunkers. And
Brian bought us all tickets to see Tony Hinchcliffe next Tuesday, so we're not going to be able to
Yep.
do election coverage.
Yep, we're wearing Puerto Rican Pride Day shirts and going to a Tony Hinchcliffe show. Should be really not divisive at all.
It won't be bad at all.
But for us around here, I just want to quickly just go through the questions. I really think those are the big,
Oh, the ballot questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's safe to say 1 through 4 easy yes.
1 through 4, very easy yes.
Question 5 is the only thing that I think is like.
Question 5 is definitely worth talking about.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you want to just go through 1 through? I'll go through 1 through 4 quick,
yes,
just as a primer.
Yeah.
Question 1: audit the state legislature. Easy yes.
Yes.
State legislature incredibly ineffective. The audit would show that. Yes.
And we have an auditor already.
We have an
Give
auditor.
them something to do.
Yeah. Question 2: MCAS graduation requirement. Easy yes. Get rid of it.
I think people, if you didn't go to school around here or have never had kids in school around here, it legitimately ruins people's lives.
Right.
The MCAS graduation requirement. Like there are kids that it ruins their high school career and then their early adulthood because of that.
Right.
And that sucks.
And it's insane.
stupid.
It's insane that the business community is a
Yeah.
major player in this question. They still have not told the truth about why they care about MCAS, as
Right.
far as I'm concerned.
Right.
How else will they decide how you fit into the machine as the cog you were designed to be?
Right. We need better cogs, folks. The cogs, they're not like they used to be. We need more precise, accurate cogs. We need to be teeny tiny,
But there's
going to
be tariffs on the cogs.
Question 3. unionizing Uber and Lyft drivers. Easy. Yeah.
easy, yeah.
They should be allowed to unionize.
Yeah.
Question 4, legalize shrooms. Whatever. Fucking whatever.
Yeah, I
Not
think
heard a good argument against it.
right.
No.
When I think we've talked about it many times, there are very opaque arguments against it that I think seem astroturfed.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but again, I think a better bet is to get it going and then.
Have you looked into that one at all? Like, had done any research beyond? No. The one question I had is why salvia isn't there.
Get on mic.
Sorry, there was some question as to. Oh, I'm not even on camera. I don't give a shit. There was some question as to whether the indigenous tribes would still have access to it as part of their religious ceremonies. There was also some talk about how it would. This current version may not be the version that we want because it would make the drugs extremely expensive, like $1,000 a dose. I don't know if this is like the entry point to this, and then we make it better, or if we push it back and ask for something better. I truly don't know, so I'm kind of curious what y'all have heard.
I still don't buy the indigenous argument because those are federal protections, and that's supremacy clause. So whatever Massachusetts does, like even if it went the hard other direction, and what made the death penalty legal for possession of peyote and mescaline, it doesn't impact the federal protections
I can see
for religious use.
I can see because of how
You just go buy it at a gas station.
Well, this is why I mentioned salvia. Is the thing that's the one thing that isn't it's not in there explicitly.
right.
So we have DMT, we have mescaline, we've got peyote. There's no, but salvia is the one that I can actually buy at the gas station, and it's also the one that like I can go to the moon within 15 minutes while waiting for the school bus.
Right.
Like, I thought that was really weird. That
Which
they
you
just-
shouldn't be waiting for the school bus, by the way.
Well, it's 'cause
it's not allowed, especially not on salvia.
Yeah. Brendan's got to be actually 500 feet away from the school bus, actually. So
If he's on
it's-
salvia.
Right.
And to
yeah.
Travis's point about the cost, I mean, all I'd say is like this provision is allowing you a 12 by 12 space to grow mushrooms. The amount of mushrooms that you can grow in a 12 by 12 space, if you need to spend thousands of dollars on mushrooms after that fact, like that was actually kind of poorly thought out in the sense that, yeah, that's a lot of mushrooms.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm most interested in with this current provision. If it does go through, I am absolutely becoming a mushroom farmer. 'Cause why not?
Yeah.
The only thing that weirds me out about it, I think, and it not for, I don't think anything is going to go sideways. It's just I feel like they're skipping steps in a weird way.
Sure.
Like when we did decrim, then 10 years later we did medical for marijuana. Speaking, and then roughly 10 years later we did full legalization. That period between decrim and medical, it allowed people to kind of get used to stuff
Like the
from a
destigmatization
legal
stuff?
perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, there are bureaucratic hurdles that need to be tackled there. It seems like they're skipping steps by just jumping straight to the medical realm and incorporating decrim into that.
Sure.
But I think every time I think that, then I remind myself there are so few people who actually use hallucinogens that you're talking about such a small percentage of people, it's almost not relevant.
Yeah, and I have no problem finding them.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
seriously, they're everywhere, but there really aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, just the raw numbers. It's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
ridiculously small.
Yeah.
You can just like order them through WhatsApp now.
Yeah.
There's like companies.
Yeah.
They have, they have
It really is only
packaging.
going to be an issue when that what's that guy comes to play in town? Tootsie Boy or Billy? What's his guy? Billy Strings.
Yeah. You just go.
That'll be the day that it's like, all right, we need to get our shit figured out for that day.
Right,
But other than that, yeah. So the religious question is obviously a good one because that's the hugely important part of it. But like you said, supremacy clause is supremacy clause. I think that while that can be complicated, I think that it shouldn't be the deciding factor.
Yeah.
In it. And then question 5 is the
Question 5 is the tricky one, and I just wrote in my overview of the election, like I'm a no on this, but I could be swayed to yes. But I'll just go through the facts real quick. Raises the minimum wage for tip workers from $6.75 to $15, which on its face that's a good thing. And it allows for new tip pooling rules that allow restaurants to cut in the back of the house staff if they want to on shared tips, which is also a good thing.
Yes.
At the same time, I have a lot of friends in the service industry, and all of them, to a person, are saying, no, this is going to destabilize everything. It's going to fuck it up. It's going to cause restaurateurs to sort of get their money back off of the tipped workers and then also it's going to create a situation for consumers where they feel like tipping is less important.
Right. And it's hard to say because in places where they've done this, it's from everything I've seen, it doesn't seem to have had a major difference. I think it does. Obviously, it benefits more larger companies than smaller restaurants. But the states that have done this already, that hasn't seemed to change anything. Also, even if we, $15 is not a living wage, so I'm never going to stop tipping 20%, even if even if they're paying, my brother works in a restaurant where they don't pay. He works in Louisiana. The minimum wage there is worse, is terrible. They pay above that, and they say you don't have to tip. We put it with 20% service charge on every bill. That covers everybody in the house, while on top of that paying them $25 an hour, which is cool. And it obviously hasn't changed their sales any. It also doesn't stop people from tipping.
Right.
On top of that, for the most part. So I'm so yes, back and forth on this question as well. I suspect that a part of the reason why, I know, but part of the reason why service industry workers don't want anything to change right now is because the system as it currently built is reliant on tax fraud.
Right.
Entirely built on a house of tax fraud. And I worked in it. I worked at Tweeds for 10 years. I got cash tips running the Keno machine for 10 years. I made so much untaxed income.
Right.
It was crazy. And it would have been different, obviously. But I also, if I was making a livable wage, then I don't have to commit tax fraud as much.
Right. But the minimum wage is not a livable wage.
It's not. And that I think is where I have a strong desire to see this change in Massachusetts. The minimum wage for everyone, obviously, but minimum wage for service industry workers, because I think that it's not good that the way that the tips system works. I think it's also bad that we're, as customers, subsidizing restaurant owners by paying their workers' salaries for them.
Right.
And that seems worse to me. But again, I think it really comes down to the fact that it sets it at $15 as opposed to, but again, that's the minimum wage in Massachusetts.
If you're a full-time server most of the time, you're doing better than minimum wage. I mean, it is a job that a full-time server or bartender can live a somewhat comfy life off of.
Sure.
It is not a $31,000 a year like poverty wage job. So I think that the anxiety of tampering with the system at all, and the official messaging from the Yes campaign includes this line that I just think is such fucking bullshit about how tips should be a reward for good service, which they're just not. They just functionally aren't.
And again, you can say that's where we should get to. Obviously that's where we it's still a gross way to put it, but we should get to that. You were in Ireland.
Right.
There's no tipping culture there. They'll take it. They're not stupid. They'll take Americans' money, extra money.
Tips are not a reward for good service. They're there because we've all done that job at some point in time.
Right.
And we know your toilet probably doesn't work, and we feel bad for you, so here's a little extra. I mean, it's really no different than, Bill, if you're out on the street with a tin can, I'm going to throw some change in there.
Right.
Right.
But I think that I'm just uncomfortable with throwing anybody that's currently making a decent life off of tips under the bus to get there. I don't think it's worth sacrificing a single worker's decent job in the meantime to change our tipping culture.
I
I think yeah. Go ahead.
No, I also think there's an argument to be made too. I won't mention any names because we're not doing advertising here, but we have some restaurants in Worcester that decided during the chaos of COVID that they were going to make a movement to living wages and make it clear to all their guests that tips are optional. From what I've seen, is those are the places, the venues that have some of the best retention for employees. Their employees seem to be gone more often than not because they're taking actual vacations.
Right.
And it's a system that can work. If regardless of how this ballot question goes, this is an industry that in a state like Massachusetts needs a grenade thrown into it from on high.
Yeah.
So it's rethought from the ground up. Like, you can understand why the owner-operator side is having a panic attack because they're already working off of whatever 5 to 10% margins, and they don't need the taxes and the extra payroll costs added into eating away at those margins. It's just everybody goes out of business.
Right.
You can see, to your point, as not a lawyer, just remind you that there is no statute of limitations on tax fraud. So Brian said all of that for comedy. It was all hypothetical.
You could not
Don't
find
clip
my
that.
records. I never looked at tweets at all.
But to Brian's point, why would you want to destroy an entire system based on tax fraud if it's working out for you in the end?
Yeah, right. So that's ultimately, I think I'm still on no because I don't like the idea of saying that we're going to move away from a tip economy by paying the minimum wage. I just don't like that.
This question
just
should have
don't
come.
like it.
This question should have come after 2 or 3 other changes in the system. One being raising the minimum wage to $25 to $27 an hour.
Yeah, right.
And then also many other changes in the restaurant industry, and also I think probably a grenade thrown into the food industry, like in general, like the supplier side industry as well, because that, I mean, is obviously never going to...
The whole pipeline, at some point in time, you're just pushing the burden of production on somebody who's getting fucked.
Right, exactly. And again, another reason why, not to be a snob, but many European countries do it better than us is because not only are there workers like in real jobs there, you go to Ireland, the food sources are local, and so there are so many other problems that we need to.
That's why they haven't
address.
invented salt yet. They just don't. They don't know where to get it.
They keep trying to chip it off the cliffs of Moher.
When they're done. We can't swim.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really wanted to talk about that because I do think it's like
It's
it's a
interesting.
hard one, and I think that so many arguments I've seen on both sides are so flawed
Right.
that it's very annoying.
There's a lot of fear mongering.
Totally. Totally.
Which is like to be expected, but like also
Yeah.
it's pretty dire. Like this passes or it fails. It's not going to ruin the restaurant industry or save restaurant workers.
No, it's just going to.
It's not, it's going to be a very mild change either way.
Right.
You know, and you know, everybody that owns a restaurant in Worcester, especially, I think, is like the guy from Texas Chainsaw 2, just complaining about how the small businessman always takes it in the ass. And I
is also actively a criminal.
and he's while being actively a criminal and like using spurious meat. So I have no sympathies, and I think that the argument that the Massachusetts Restaurant Association has poisoned the discourse on this is like a good one. But I also don't want to come out and say that my friends' like opinions have been poisoned by the Massachusetts Restaurant Association because they have a valid perspective.
They're at the bottom of the well here, as far as like they're in the most precarious position, and they have the least to say about it, and they're getting the most like pressure put on them.
Yeah.
You know, when you work at a niche restaurant and they're printing up T-shirts for you to wear.
Yeah.
And spending thousands of dollars on placards to hold out, just to hand out. Just fucking pay me more, you dumb dipshits.
Right. But I just think that the worker has to be central in the conversation, and like conversations about whether or not you're subsidizing whoever by your tips are like a secondary concern to that being a good job for people.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I think is the way to keep it in your mind, I guess. So I'm still no, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
You know?
There you go. Yeah.
I don't like why.
Yeah.
Well, let's call it there for tonight. I did want on the vein of of restaurants, I just wanted to shout out this weekend at Ralph's Diner, Drive-In, and Die.
So
The
sick.
haunted attraction was so fucking great.
Yeah, it was
Um,
really special.
If you didn't get a chance to go, make sure that you hit it next year because they really did an amazing job. Big, huge credit to everybody over there that organized that and the whole bar for pulling it off. And yeah, I thank you everyone for tuning in to us tonight. Obviously, we had some technical issues. We switched over to a new platform for handling our actual stream. So things are going to be, we're rebuilding it. And we're working hard to get it done, but obviously there's going to be some hiccups here as we figure it out, but we appreciate everybody tuning in. Obviously a huge thanks to Allie for joining us as well tonight for such a great conversation. We don't have our graphics, so we'll just shout it out. Please make sure you're subscribed to worcestersucks.email, at Worcester_sucks on Instagram. Worcester Sucks and I Love It is the name of the game. Follow us here on Twitch. Subscribe if you like, so that we can buy more equipment that we need now because we deleted our other StreamYard account because they were gouging us. Follow our Instagram, WCT3000. Follow at Wootenanny Comedy. We got a bunch of shows coming up. We have some hot dogs coming up. We got the Sort of Late show coming up in December. We also have a show on December 5th at New Tradition Company, brand new venue for us for stand-up that we're very excited about. So thank you all again for hanging out with us. Good luck next week. And we'll see you after the election. And hope
Hopefully.
everybody stays safe. Yeah. Meet us in Toronto, everybody. We love you.